There's probably about 9, 10 quarterback spots maybe that are going to have openings or going to have some changes. Casey Joyner is going to talk a little bit about that. As Casey and I talked a little bit before he came on the show today, he talked about a major shift in the elite quarterbacks, and that's something that we talked about on Wednesday, how that top tier is getting smaller and smaller and smaller, Casey. And I think there's a lot of interesting quarterback situations that are going to be opening up, and some change is on the horizon in the NFL because Brady can't keep doing it for that much longer, can he?
I wouldn't think so. You look at NFL history, and people usually, when they hit the age of 35, you can look at quarterback performance in any sport. Usually at 35 is when a player will drop off. In fact, I remember reading a study years ago that physiologists said the human body declines between the ages of 35 and 40 at a faster pace than it does at any other time during your life. So Brady is an exception to that rule, but hey, Ben's 34, and some of these other quarterbacks, they're going to hit that age very soon or get real close to it, and I think you're going to see a lot of those quarterbacks start to bow out of the league, and when we do, we're going to have a bit of a vacuum.
I have some openings, and I want to pick your brain about whether whether it's a good fit for them to stay with their incumbent or move on. And two of them really are interesting to me. Arizona, okay. Is Carson Palmer the best fit for them moving? Do they take another? I mean, because that team's really hard. They were a Super Bowl contender coming in this year, and you could surmise, Casey, maybe you would agree or disagree, that their quarterback play was a big reason as to why they are sitting home for the playoffs this year. So if you're Arizona, are you looking for a new starting quarterback, or do you go another year with Palmer?
I probably would. You definitely want to be thinking, because you're going to get maybe another year or two out of because Palmer's, I want to say he's 35, 36. He's already in that range that we're talking about age-wise. So you definitely want to be going in a different direction. In fact, I was had a conversation with a scout earlier this year, and he said one of the reasons that Arizona dropped off, he said suddenly Carson Palmer just became a mediocre quarterback just immediately. He's fallen apart, and this is a guy I respect. So if he tells me that's what he thinks is happening, and plus you could see it too if you're just watching the games. But it's another instance where this is. I think they need to be thinking we need to get another year out of him, maybe at most, but. In that offense, you've got to find a vertical passer. You can't just find a dink and dunk passer. You've got to go specifically for a guy who can throw deep. So I think it's a tougher position for them to fill.
Okay, so if Palmer was not the guy, there's going to probably be some changes. What would you think about a guy like Jay Cutler as a stopgap in Arizona?
Cutler used to be. He was I almost changed my bad decision rate metric to the Cutler metric because he was just the poster child for just making a horrible decision on the field. Just both variety and consistency. He would just do it all the time. He's fixed that of late. Last few years, he's been solid in that category. So. And now that in that offense, you want risk takers. So I like it from the standpoint that he'll take the chances and he'll be a gunslinger quarterback. He'd be a good fit from that perspective. But how much interest does he have? I mean, so many times you think that he's just not as interested in being a pro quarterback as some of the elite quarterbacks. So if you think he can garner that, if you think he can keep him interested and keep him, ready to play this for the whole season, yeah, do it. But I would probably be leaning towards not doing it.
A couple other, I think there's a lot of interesting quarterback situations. Arizona's one. Another one, they're kind of stuck, and that's Houston. I mean, do they go with the Savage-Osweiler combination again? Is there, another option that's out there for them, or do they just got to suck it up with Osweiler again?
I think they need to move on from Osweiler because if you look over his career, both last year in Denver and even going back to his days at Arizona State, he doesn't throw vertical passes very well. In fact, his senior season at Arizona State, when he was under duress, meaning when he didn't have a clean pocket, there were like 65 qualifying passers and vertical passes that year, and he was 61st in vertical yards per attempt. It was just abysmal. I mean, the guy cannot throw deep passes. So he, by himself, he can make Will Fuller and Nuke Hopkins. He can make them both just average receivers. So you have to go elsewhere. I'd probably go into Savage. I'd be looking into the draft, but, the draft doesn't have – there's not that many good prospects in the draft or guys who you think could come and make an immediate impact.
How about Denver? You stay the course with the two young kids, Simeon and Lynch, and let them battle it out? Or do you think the current state of their team that they should look outside and look veteran?
I think they've got good enough performance out of their quarterbacks, and Simeon has shown that he can manage the type of offense that you need to have that can win if you have an elite defense. And I don't think he deserved the Pro Bowl berth that were supposedly given to him that he turned down. I don't think he's at that level, but he's a good enough quarterback. When you start looking at his metrics and start looking at how he played later in the year, he was an upper half of the league quarterback in a number of categories. Now, I don't mean top 10. I mean, he's that good, but you're talking, I think he was 13th in yards per attempt the second half of the season. So that, I mean, when you can get to that level at this point, it says, okay, you've got that kind of a ceiling. And Lynch is a talent. He's raw, but he is a talent too. So if I'm them, you always want to look for another quarterback. But if I'm them, I'm saying I'm pretty happy where I'm at quarterback. Right, it's not my primary goal to upgrade there.
Casey Joyner, ESPN.com, NFL Insider, looking at the quarterbacks is probably the most important position, maybe in all of sports, but definitively in football if you want to make that run to the Super Bowl, and a lot of teams are going to need them this year. We're looking at, okay, there's Arizona, they're going to need one, or potentially need one. Denver could need one. You look at Houston, they probably want one. We don't know if they can get one. If you're Cleveland, do you take a wild swing in the draft, or do you look for a veteran, or do you stick with Robert Griffin III?
I think they need to be a team that says we need, because there's a thought in the scouting world that says you should always be looking for a quarterback. No matter what, you should always be trying to find another quarterback, because it's just talent is so rare at that position that you should, if you think you've got an opportunity to get somebody, you should always look at that. And I don't think they should be relying on thinking that who they have on the roster or RG3 or anybody else is going to be the solution to the problem. Problem is in the draft. I mean, the best prospect is a guy named Mitch Trubisky from North Carolina. He's good. He's the closest thing you've got to a pro-ready quarterback, but he's held only like one good season at North Carolina, and you don't see elite passer when you look at that. And everybody else, Deshaun Kaiser, Deshaun Watson, Brad Kaya, Luke Falk. I mean, Falk's one of the most. He's an incredibly accurate passer, and so you could find some things there and say, okay, well, if we want a dink-a-dunk passer, we can get a Luke Falk. If we want a dual threat, we can go for Watson. They've got guys who can fit whatever system they want to do, but there's nobody who looks like pro-ready in this draft.
Your take on Tyrod Taylor? The Bills are not enamored with him. I mean, it looks like they're going to, probably let him walk. Would you stick with him, and what kind of value would he have around the league?
If you're talking about replacing a quarterback, you got to find somebody who's going to be better. I don't think E.J. Manuel is better than Taylor. So if I'm Buffalo, I'm thinking, okay, Taylor's maybe the best option that I have at the moment. You might look around. I don't think you're going to find anybody else who's going to be appreciably better than Taylor. And the problem with Taylor is that they've got a fantastic running game, and he's got some running options too. And they've got Watkins, and they don't have really any other receivers. But when you put him under center and you see what he can do with all this talent around him, there's still like a ceiling. It's how good can he be? Do people think he can be a top 10 quarterback? I don't know if he's going to be a top 10 quarterback. I think straddling at 10. I don't think he's getting anywhere near top 5. And you can win if you've got that, but you've got to have like an elite defense. You got to be like Denver. You got to have an elite defense and elite other areas. So I think that he places the kind of ceiling that says maybe they can make the playoffs with him, but I don't know if they could get any further. So if I'm Buffalo, I'm still looking for upgrade options.
If you're Washington, are you franchising Kirk Cousins again?
Yeah, because his big problem coming into this year was vertical passing. He was one of the better vertical passers, and if you take certain segments of the year, he's one of the best vertical passers in the league. So he solved that issue. He also shown that this year that he can hit vertical passes to people other than Deshaun Jackson. Before it was like he would have great numbers with Jackson and mediocre numbers with everybody else. You start getting those numbers now. It's like, oh, he's got really good numbers with a lot of receivers. That shows progress as a quarterback in the most important area. He still makes some boneheaded decisions. He still makes some crazy passes, but you can hopefully coach that out of him and make him begin to make a few fewer of those. But let me put it this way. If you're Washington, you're looking at that going, do we think we can win with this guy? Do we think we can get somewhere with this guy? I think the answer is yes, and I think if you moved away from him with somebody else, I think that would be a bigger drop-off for them potentially than it would be for a lot of other quarterback changes.
Do you see enough from Jared Goff to make an opinion on what kind of quarterback you think he might be?
I think he needs a better quarterback coach, for one. He had a lot of problems when he got into center. I mean, there were times you could see there's some accuracy benefit pluses for him and things, but he looked very rattled. He looked very It wasn't even just that you could see he felt the pass rush. He looked confused. He looked confused and he looked rattled, which, again, if you're confused and you don't know what you're doing reading defenses very well, then, yeah, you're going to be rattled. So there were a lot of things that showed up on tape, and he had terrible metrics, too, just awful metrics. And if you're the Rams, you've got a really good defense. You've got the makings of a really good running game because Gurley actually played a lot better down the stretch. But you need a quarterback upgrade. And if I'm them, I might be saying, I want to sit Goff on the bench and have him learn for another year or so, or do something, try and do something to maybe, get him some more playing time somewhere or something, maybe give him a developmental league or something. But I would not want to play, if I'm them, I don't want him under center for 16 games because I think it could be worse than what we saw this year.
Casey Joyner with us, and Casey, we all know how important the QB is. It does seem like there's a lot of good, solid guys, but maybe not a lot of great guys, making it more difficult if you don't have that elite guy to make a Super Bowl. Is the QB now more important than ever?
I think we're going to be seeing a shift in quarterbacks. I think we talked about the top guys who are leaving out, but I think NFL and as a whole is going to. I don't think we're going to see a type of situation where you're seeing, if you remember back in the 90s, Neil O'Donnell made a Super Bowl. You had in the 2000s, you had Rex Grossman made a Super Bowl. When that happens, you wonder if the league has enough quality quarterbacks. And I said this draft is pretty thin in quarterbacks, but you still look at the potential good young quarterbacks in the league, and you're going, okay, you still have Marcus Mariota, you still have Andrew Luck. I think Blake Bortles could be a lot better than he was last year. You still have Derek Carr. It could be a potential MVP. You've got Prescott. Cousins, has stepped up. We can put Carson Wentz in there. I think he's got a really bright future. You start looking and go, okay, there's a lot of still good young quarterbacks. Even Minnesota's got a pair of quarterbacks now that they might be able to build off of. So I think there's going to be enough quarterback talent in the league that you're not going to see many teams that don't have good quarterbacks making Super Bowl runs.
How about the state of quarterbacks in today's game? Is there good depth at that position?
Yeah, and we're talking. The guys were just talking about there, and the thing is, I think if we're talking, you can get the top guys, but I think when it comes to depth, it's going to be how does some of the other guys progress? How does Jameis Winston, does he become? What's his ceiling? Because he's shown that he can throw a lot of passes. He can throw a lot of vertical passes too. The guy doesn't hesitate to throw the ball downfield, but quarterbacking is about more than just racking up a bunch of numbers. It's about more than just volume. You've got to be quality. And where does he get to? Does he get to that level? And I'm still curious about Matt Ryan. When I start looking at his metrics for this year, incredibly consistent passer, and it says a lot for him. But when you start delving a little deeper, you find that his receivers were having fantastic seasons too. Very low drop rates. There are a lot of metrics where it says, boy, he got a lot of help from his receivers. And if his receivers take a step back, does Matt Ryan take a step back? Or if their offensive line starts to get banged up next year. So is he going to stay at this MVP level, or is this a one-time thing for him?
Yeah, one real quick on Matt Ryan. I think this is a huge game for him, because as you kind of said, there's this shift in the elite quarterback classes. I think he can either put himself in that category or be questioned at the end of this one. Because when I look at elites for me, Casey, have you won a Super Bowl? Have you won an MVP? And are you consistently in that conversation for MVP? And he can knock off 2 boxes with this game potentially. Now, he can't do anything about the MVP. That's already been decided. But if he ends up winning an MVP and a Super Bowl in the same season, we're going to look at him a little differently.
Yep, and the thing is, though, and I'll be writing about this probably for Insider next week, ESPN's Insider section, when you look at the history of MVPs and how they've played in Super Bowls, it's not very good. I did an analysis last year for Cam Newton and found that when you looked at the history, it was really, really not good, especially of late. And so to see Newton struggle actually wasn't a surprise. I think Ryan might be able to offset that, but I think he could also be. If they don't win this game, I think it's one of those things where this could be one of those seasons where he got there. We can also be looking at like Joe Flacco. And Flacco wins the Super Bowl a few years ago, and I know Ryan's a lot better than Flacco. I don't put those guys necessarily in the same category, but Flacco makes the Super Bowl, and people think, "Hey, is Joe Flacco elite? Is Joe Flacco elite?" And there are a couple of times where you thought he might be, and then you go, "No, he's Joe Flacco. He is what we thought he was." I think with Matt Ryan, it might be the same thing. If this might be the one year where everything goes well for him and everything clicks, and man, this is how good he could be. But I have a feeling that things are going to not go as well, maybe in the Super Bowl and in future years, and he's going to come back down to earth. So he does need to win this. This is a game that's going to establish his legacy. Because if he doesn't win this game, I don't think he gets an opportunity like this.
Casey Joyner with us. We've talked a lot about the signal callers, Casey, but I want to shift to what used to be a glamour position in the NFL and certainly in the NFC East, and that's running back. Do you see an influx of talent at the running back position again?
I see a fantastic influx of talent. Fantasy footballers are going to love this because they're finally going to have more running backs. It used to be you can only get through first round of a fantasy football league, and you were starting to already fight over scraps and things. But you're going to have Leonard Fournette, who's a fantastic breakaway threat, a big breakaway threat. Dalvin Cook is a really speedy back. Kind of remind sort of Devontae Freeman is today, and you got Deontay Foreman. He's a power back from Texas. You got Christian McCaffrey, a do-it-all back. You put him in a good West Coast offense. If you were to put him in, say, Green Bay, oh, my gosh, he would be a fantastic find for them. And you've got Wayne Gallman from Clemson, another power back. You've even got Samaje Perine from Oklahoma, who's been a breakaway threat. I mean, you've got a number of backs who can come into this draft and make immediate – I mean, talking 2017 can have if they ran in the right situation, they could have immediate impacts on their team. So I have a feeling if this pans out like this, you're going to see teams start to lean a little more on the ground game than they have in the past few years.
Yeah, which is interesting because it's a passing league, and we haven't seen running backs. You talk about fantasy football, we haven't seen running backs taken in the actual draft in the first round, and then all of a sudden last year Elliott, and then he explodes onto the scene. Do you think teams will start to shift their focus in the draft and start to go after those guys back in the first round? We're going to see the running back back in the first round of the draft again.
It would be a huge surprise if Foreman, Cook, Fournette, and McCaffrey were not taken in the first round this year. It would be a surprise if you didn't have those four running backs taken in the first round, in my opinion. And I think Gallman would be a second-round pick. And mind you, Perine and Connor are not that far behind. And mind you, Donnell Pumphrey from San Diego State, who set records this year, is breaking some of the all-time records. I mean, he's a guy who might need to make the top 10 as far as running back listed in depth of the draft this year, because that's how strong the position is. So, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if you saw players go in the top four. And if I'm Philadelphia Eagles, I'm thinking of taking one of those guys as my top pick.
It's funny you say that because they're at 14, 15. If they stick there, the consensus is they need a playmaker, whether it be wide receiver, corner, or running back. So if you're at 14 or 15, a couple of years ago, you would never think of taking a running back at that spot. But if the best player, the best playmaker at 14 or 15 is a running back, if the wide receiver you like's not there, the corner there, so you say 14, 15 in today's game, because what do the analytics say about taking a running back? I know that's right up your alley.
Yeah, the analytics. The thing is, though, is that if I'm looking at Philadelphia, I mean, you're talking the analytics about how much talent there is at running back, and if you look at the analytics, you find that good blocking is what gives you a good running game more than a great running back. But if Philadelphia, looking at the situation, going, okay, you've got if Matthews is your power back, you can't count on him because he gets too banged up and things. He never plays a full season. You've got smallish backs behind him, and Sproles, who's older anyway, and you're going to replace him soon enough. And yeah, Smallwood's good, but he's a smallish back, so you need somebody who can be that you need an Ezekiel Elliott. You need a bell cow back. You need a guy who can pound the ball in there. So if I'm looking, I can find fits for all four of those guys I was mentioning, but I can see McCaffrey in the Philadelphia offense going. He would be a fantastic pick because he's a fantastic running back as far as he can power run it. He can run it if you want to use speed running or power running, he could do both. And he's a terrific receiver too. So I mean, he could be an all-purpose back for Philadelphia and take that running game because they're already got good blocking there. Philadelphia's a top 5 team in good blocking rate. You put him behind that offense, and now you can start to match the Cowboys.
You think teams will go back to the bell cow, or do you think we'll still see the rotation running backs? Splitting carries, because it seems like if you have a guy, the Le'Veon Bell, Ezekiel Elliott, if you had the guy that can carry the load, those teams seem to prosper. Not all of them. I mean, some team, Atlanta has a split. But do you think we're going to see more of teams go back to the one, lead back?
I think that teams prefer to do that because if you start to split your backs, you may send signals to the other team as to what you want to do on offense. If you're starting to put your back in here, starting to put this back in there, you can start maybe inadvertently dictating what you're trying to do. And if you can just keep one back out there, you've got the threat to run or pass all the time. So I think that would be the preference And with these backs here, I don't, Cook and McCaffrey are both very good in the passing game. I think Foreman and Fournette are a little more limiting. So it might be one of those situations where if whoever lands Fournette and Foreman may decide, okay, we're going to go ahead and pound the ball with these guys, and they're going to end up in that sort of team. And if you're trying to do a little more variation in your backs and things, you're going to go with the other two. But whoever gets them, I think they're going to try and lead in them as a bell cow back as much as possible.
Casey, we talked quarterbacks, we talked running backs. Talk Super Bowl a little. Who is the better quarterback and who is the better running backs?
In the Super Bowl?
Yep.
Yep. I'm taking. I had a vote in the Pro Football Writers of America MVP voting, and I voted for Tom Brady because as great as a season as Matt Ryan had, I think that a lot of why he did as well as he did is because the players around him played exceptionally well. He had fantastic running backs because when you're talking about, if you're talking running back, it's easily the Falcons because their pair of Coleman and Freeman, those guys can do things. They both can run and pass in ways that the Patriots backs can't. I mean, the Patriots backs they're going to be the ultimate. We're going to put that back in there, and he's going to do. Hey, here's our pass catcher back. Here's our power running back. They're going to kind of dictate that. Whereas with Falcons, they can do whatever they want to with their backs. When you're talking quarterbacks, I voted Brady over Ryan because Brady led the league in vertical yards per attempt. He only had Gronk for a few games. And, he's throwing to Chris Hogan. He's throwing to Edelman. He's throwing to these backs. He's throwing to Martellus. He's not throwing. None of these guys are elite vertical receivers, and he leads the league in vertical yards per attempt. And I'm looking at it going, well, Matt Ryan, he better vertical yards per attempt than Matt Ryan. I'm thinking, well, yeah, Matt Ryan has Julio Jones and Sanu's a pretty good receiver, too. And that's not what Brady has. And for Brady to do that at 39, it's awe-inspiring.
And by the way, Brady for the career, I think for this year was Ryan's having a great year this year. So Ryan versus Brady for 1 year right now for one game in this particular, you're taking Brady over Ryan every time in a career situation. But the running backs are interesting because the Falcons one's more dynamic. I think it depends on what mood Belichick wakes up in that day. Does he want to grind it with Blunt, or does he want to kind of be a little bit more dynamic with Dion Lewis? I likened it this morning that he has a wheel in his room, and he just spins the wheel on Sunday mornings and says, "All right, you're going to be the star today, Chris Hogan. Come on down."
You can see that happening, kind of like a Monty Hall situation. Absolutely. The thing about it for the backs, though, from their perspective is New England's good blocking rate this year. They only got a good blocking rate of 37%. It was 18th in the league. So this is not – they're a little below average. And Atlanta had a good blocking rate of 41%, so their backs can count on good blocking better. But the thing is, New England does things with when they decide they want to do the power running game, they're trying to get you as a defense to say, hey, you have to respect Blunt because if we give him good blocking, he's going to get significant gains. And we're going to wear you down that way. And we're going to put your linebackers into situations where they got to cover these receivers. Okay, they got White and they've got Lewis. Okay, we have two players we can go out with you and things. So I think that flexibility, because he has different players to play those roles, it does dictate a little, or it does, telegraph a bit maybe what he might do. Because if you put Blunt out there, you're not throwing him the ball that much. But for what the game plan of what Belichick might want to do, he's got all that he needs from the running back position.
I don't know how he does it sometimes, but we'll get more into the Super Bowl next week when Casey joins us. We'll really start to get the matchups to watch, where he likes the advantages. That'll be fun on next week's shows when we talk to Casey Joyner here on the Sports Bash. But good quarterback conversation. I think I agree with you in terms of the depth at that position. A lot of really good ones, but not the elites are drying up a little bit. We're starting to fall. The Bradys are getting older. Roethlisberger, he might even need to talk about retiring. I don't know if we believe him, but there's a good pack of guys in that middle who will pull themselves away from the pack. Matt Ryan has a chance to do it on Super Sunday. All right, pal, we'll talk next week.
Sounds great, man.